Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Beat the Big Guys. I'm your host, Sandy Rosenthal. And today I have a guest from a state where I've never had a guest before. And that town, the state is Idaho, and the town is Pocatello. I love the sound of that. And my guest is none other than Roland Angle. Hello, Roland.
Hi, Sandy. How are you?
I'm wonderful, thank you. It's a hot, hot day here in New Orleans, but that's totally normal for this time of year. And right now, normal is okay. I'm okay with normal right now.
All right. Well, I'm up here. The weather here is nice and mild, cloudy, little rain.
And is that normal for this time of year?
Yeah, very normal. Good weather.
Good,
Good weather in May and June.
good,
Gets hot
good,
lately.
good. This show will not be broadcasted for at least 6 weeks from now. But right now, in New York City, they're experiencing the most awful smoke. And it must be terrible for them. It must be terrible for the Canadians as well, where the forest fires are. So hopefully those have been long been quenched by the time this episode airs.
I hope so. That's terrible. I was living in California a couple of years ago, and we've had several years of really bad smoke.
Were you there when the town of San Francisco just turned orange?
Yes.
Yes, yes, I was there too. I took a picture of it. I was riding over the Oakland Bridge into the city, and the sky was orange. And I took a picture with my iPhone, and it just looked so eerie. It looked like I was taking a picture of Mars.
Yeah. Well, that was a day when the wind conditions were just right and the fires were really going on, and that's the effect you got.
Right, right. It was terrifying, and we ended up having to evacuate.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah,
Yeah, the
that was
smoke
in
was so bad.
summer about 2, 3 years ago. So, so anyway, this is why when we recall things like this or discuss things like this, it's a moment like that where you go, "Hey, it's normal for this time of year. Normal weather for this time of year. That's good. That's a good thing. Hopefully, we'll get more and more of that."
Yeah.
So, I know our listeners are tuned in here to get some great tools, tips, and tricks on how to beat the big guys in their own community, and I'm ready to start if you are.
Let's go.
Okay, I'm going to begin by reading the short bio that Mr. Angle sent me. Is it all right if I call you Roland?
That's fine.
Okay, then you can call me Sandy. Roland Angle is chairman of the board of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. He has more than 50 years of experience as a civil engineer. He leads project due diligence, AE 9/11 Truths, which stands for Architects and Engineers, the outreach to the civil and structural engineering community, bringing their members an analysis alleging that the three high rise steel framed buildings that collapsed at the World Trade Center on 9/11 were brought down by controlled demolition. Well, I'm actually familiar with this. It's much more than a theory. I'm very familiar with it, and really look forward to hearing more about it from you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share this information. It's very
Y-
important.
You're welcome. So fire away. We'd love to hear about it.
Okay, well, I am a civil engineer, as Sandy mentioned. I've been practicing for more than 50 years, and I have been active in architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth since about 2009. Just a brief history of that organization. It was formed initially by architect Richard Gage, who practiced in the Bay Area in California, where I was living at the time. And when the official report on the collapse of the Twin Towers was released by the National Institute of Standards and Technology in 2005, we all began to look at that report because, of course, this was an event that not only affected our profession, but it changed history. So there was a lot of interest. And frankly, for those of us that were able to conduct some kind of a investigation into that report, it was very disappointing because the report was supposed to explain why the Twin Towers collapsed, because that was the question that was on everybody's mind. But in fact, the report, although it was 13,500 pages long, never explained why the buildings collapsed. It only went into what they proposed was the collapse initiation, which they said was caused by the fires, the impact of the planes, of course, and the fires that were resulted afterwards. And they said that weakened the steel in the impact zone, and the top of the tower fell on the lower part of the building, and then the buildings fell down. Well, that was obvious from everyone that watched the event on the videos and the television coverage, but that didn't explain in technical terms why the much greater mass of the building in the lower part of the underneath the impact zone would have collapsed under the impact of the much smaller and much lighter upper portion of the building. So we were dissatisfied with that report. Many people were dissatisfied with that report in the industry, and Richard Gage took the initiative and formed Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, and he went around, started speaking to architects and to engineers and to the general public. And I went to one of his presentations, and he made a convincing case that the conclusions that the report drew were not consistent with the evidence. So he had a petition, and I signed a petition for engineers and architects calling for a new investigation. And I think I was something like the 360th person to sign that petition. As of right now, we have more than 3,600 architects and engineers that have signed that petition calling for a new investigation. And in the intervening years, we've done all the research that we could muster, and we're a nonprofit. We don't have a big budget, but we have some great volunteers and people that have stepped forward and devoted a great deal of their time and energy and expertise to investigating this issue. In the meantime, there was another building that collapsed later that afternoon, Building 7, and it was a 47-story steel frame structure. And it had some office fires in it that were set ostensibly because of the collapse of the buildings next to it. And it collapsed. It's 5:20 in the afternoon that day, straight down into its own footprint in 7 seconds. Now, that is a remarkable occurrence. There's never been a steel frame building that collapsed due to normal office fires. And that's why we build these buildings out of steel, so that we have the safety that's required in case the building catches fire. You've got plenty of time to get people out. So this is a remarkable occurrence and extraordinary, and requires some kind of an extraordinary explanation. NIST took another 3 years to come up with that report, and they released that in 2008, late in the year. And we began to examine their evidence there. And in the same manner that we had had problems with the Twin Towers, we had the same kinds of problems with the Building 7 report. It proposed a highly unlikely and complicated scenario wherein the office fires had heated a long steel beam on the 13th floor, and the beam had expanded, pushed a girder off of its seat at an interior column. That floor then collapsed down 8 floors, causing instability in that column. And the column then buckled and caused the 2 adjacent columns next to it to buckle, which led to the collapse of all the interior columns, 24 of them. And then the exterior columns failed as well, and the building collapsed straight down into its own footprint.
If I may, so just in the interest of time, and I know you're an engineer, and I know how engineers want to tell the whole story and have a hard time condensing.
Yeah.
Okay. But keep in mind, we don't have too much time, but I think it's clear that from what you said is what you witnessed, the explanation doesn't explain what we've witnessed from an engineering standpoint. A layman think, oh yeah, you drive a plane, of course it's going to fall down. But from an engineer standpoint, the explanation, the official explanation, just didn't add up. Am I right?
That's correct.
Okay.
To make it very short, here's the story. all three of those buildings collapsed under what we call design loads.
Okay.
In other words, they were designed to withstand those loads. The towers were designed to withstand the impact of a commercial airliner, and Building 7 was designed to withstand normal office fires. When you have a structure that fails under design loads, something is wrong. Something in your design is wrong, or there's something that you don't understand about that event that you need to study and figure it out, because you don't want it to happen again.
Either the design was wrong or the explanation is wrong.
That's correct.
Okay.
So we looked at the design and we looked at the explanation, and we found that the design was very adequate and met all of our standards, and it was the explanation that didn't fit.
Okay. I'm
So,
with you.
okay,
Okay.
so
So now what?
right. So then we pursued an explanation, a changed explanation. We said we submitted a request for correction, which we're allowed to do so under the law, to the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And we said, listen, we found these problems with your report on Building 7. We started with Building 7 because we had more complete information there.
Mm-hmm.
And we said, here's the problems. Please respond and tell us why you agree or disagree with what we've found. So they came back to us and said essentially what they had said in the first place. They just didn't address the questions that we had raised at all. They just
repeated the same thing.
Right.
Okay.
So
that's a sign. That's a sign like, you've asked a question they don't want to answer. So rather than answer it, they just repeated themselves. But I'm sorry, let me shut up and let you talk.
No, that's fine, because I know you had the same kind of experience. I've read your book and I understand exactly what was going on. And I think actually we're really talking about two examples of the same problem. And that is that our governmental organizations that are supposed to be defending us and protecting us are not doing so. And unfortunately, in my profession, in the civil engineering profession, our professional organization is going along with that. They're not challenging that, and they are become accessories to the problem. And we've tried to take this information out. That's what project due diligence is all about. We're going out to the rank and file of the ASCE chapters and branches around the country, and they're trying to block us from even talking to their members. Whenever they can, they make every attempt to stop us from talking to their members. This is not a protocol. We're a scientific organization, practical applications of science, and the process is always the same. If you have a problem or something that you don't understand or something that there's conflicting views on, you have debates about it back and forth. You write papers, you submit them, people read the papers, they respond. There's a back and forth that goes on. And that back and forth is designed to ferret out what the problems are and come to a conclusion that you can then go forward with that's going to improve the performance of your profession. That's not happening. They're hiding. And so we know that that means that they're wrong, because if they had answers to what we have to say, they would come out and say, well, this is where you're wrong, this is where you're wrong, and this is where you're wrong. But instead we get silence and a repetition of the same story over and over again. And on top of that, they threaten people that are still working with their livelihood, and they call us names, and it becomes like a kindergarten sandbox fight. And we're not going to involve ourselves in that. We're still trying to get the answers to the questions that were raised. So that's the long and the short of it.
Okay. Do you have more to share, or is it okay for us to do a little back and forth?
Well, all I can say is that I've got a team of about 40 engineers across the country, and we're reaching out to these local chapters and also other professional engineering organizations, which unfortunately have followed the lead of the American Society of Civil Engineers. I'm talking about the National Society of Professional Engineers, the National Alliance of Forensic Engineers, the Structural Engineers Associations. They've all jumped into line, at least the leadership has. Now, in contrast, whenever we've been able to make these presentations, and we've been able to make 50 of these presentations so far, We've talked to more than 1,000 engineers and presented our information to them, and we have not had one single engineer tell us that they thought we were wrong. So there's a huge disconnect between the rank and file of our professional organizations and our professional leadership. The professional leadership is involved in dodging the questions, refusing to answer, name calling, and the rank and file is saying, you have legitimate information here. We need to be discussing this. So there's the contradiction, and there's the dilemma that we're facing.
Okay, I hear you, and I understand. I cannot not tell you how much I understand. Have you, Roland? Has your group attempted to get an article published about this
Yes,
in a
we have.
journal?
Yes, we've actually had several articles
Good.
that are in agreement with us.
In which journals?
Well, the most important one was a study of the dust
Okay.
that was published in a physics and chemistry journal in Europe. We
Okay.
found the European and Asian publications are much more open to what we have to say than
Yeah,
they
interesting. And yet that's true. And then so once this article is published, how is it promoted? I mean, how is anyone supposed to find out about this important article that got published?
Well, we've covered it on our website extensively.
Okay.
All this
Okay.
information is available on our website. But as I said, the capture of these organizations extends to the publications of the profession. There's a very close connection. In other words, all the major publications in our field
Mm-hmm.
are published by these professional organizations.
Right, but
And
you
since the
can't.
leadership has taken a position that they will not discuss this,
Okay.
they won't
I'm
talk.
going to grab something.
Okay.
No, you keep talking.
This is a persistent problem.
So here, this is what my organization did. We got an article published in Water Policy, which is the official journal of the World Water Council, but a story about this was in the New York Times. And that's how people found out about it, because unless you read this, you're not going to know about it. So that's why I was asking about the journal article. But the fact that you got an article published is major. The challenge is making sure people find out about it. But we have a lot to talk about, and so I just can't wait to get started. So one of the things that was actually technical, I didn't know that the top half or the top portion of the World Trade Centers were lighter than the bottom.
Yes, you can think of them as a pyramid structure.
Okay, they don't look like a pyramid.
They have to be a lot stronger at the bottom.
Interesting. I had no idea.
They're carrying all the weight above it.
Yeah.
So if you travel up the building, the actual sections of the structural elements become lighter, become thinner.
Yeah, I didn't know. I mean, it makes sense. I just didn't know. And there's a ton out there that the average layperson has no idea. And this is just one of these. I'm sure that there's a lot. And also, I'd like to read a copy of that article that got published in the European Journal. Like I said, the ours wasn't European, but it was an international journal that it happened to be based in Marseille. But I look forward to getting a copy about that. So I couldn't help but notice see the similarity between you and me, that when you went to the engineering societies and wanted to give a talk at their conferences, they turned you away.
That's right. In
And what
fact,
was their excuse for turning you away?
they didn't have an excuse. They simply
No
threatened.
excuse.
They call out the security guards and tell us that we had paid to attend the conference. We were conference attendees. We had paid up, and they invite people to come, and it's a great opportunity to network. That's what they say.
Okay.
So we went there to network and tell them our information, and they didn't want it. They did not want us to do that.
Okay. Now I understand. And what happened when after this, a similar thing, after this article got published, one of the authors of the paper his name is H.J. Bosworth, and he's actually a member of my organization. He went to the American Society of Civil Engineers and said, I would like to give a talk at your next conference about this, the findings of this article that got published and featured in the New York Times. And you ready for what they said to him? Oh, that's not news. Katrina was 10 years ago.
Right,
And this isn't news, when actually this was news. This
right.
was new information being put in front of the American people. So that was their excuse. But you know what? The record will show, and it's the same for you, Roland. The record will show that you tried, that you approached them, and you wanted to talk about this and were turned away. And keep track of every single time that's happened, because it's going there's going to come a time where they just can't keep saying no, and they're going to have to, and then their faces are going to be covered with jam, if it becomes public that you were turned away when you were just trying to get the truth out. Okay, I also noticed that you mentioned that stood out a lot. You said you didn't have a whole lot of money, but you had a lot of volunteers. You know, for you listeners out there, you don't need a boatload of money to beat the big guys, because you will have volunteers. These volunteers that can offer their expertise. We're talking about volunteers that could charge, $100, $250 an hour, but they're happy to donate their expertise when they feel you're bucking the system and trying to do good. They love it. In fact, they're looking for opportunities to provide their expertise, and it comes in all shapes and forms. Another example is attorneys. Lots of attorneys out there enjoy giving their time pro bono to causes that they believe in. So don't worry if you don't have a lot of money, because you're not going to need a lot of money. And I'll tell you what, if you do start wielding cash, like you've got a boatload of cash to spend, people are going to be suspicious. They're going to wonder if you're the real deal and wonder if you really are a real nonprofit. A nonprofit, by definition, equals no money. And the reason is they can't accept money from stakeholder groups or industries. Okay, then they're not a nonprofit anymore. So I have a question, Roland. I did what lots of people would do if they were in my shoes, is I went to Wikipedia to learn a little bit more about 9/11, A&E for 9/11 truth. And I looked it up in Wikipedia. Well, I didn't go to Wikipedia. The Wikipedia article came up. Okay.
Right on
And,
top.
yeah, it comes out. Wikipedia is that search engines seem to go for it. And it described the group, I'm sure you know this, as a conspiracy
Right.
theorist. Okay. So what is your what do you want to share with our listeners about that? And what they should do if they were ever called conspiracy theorists?
Well, that's a pejorative term that's been thrown around at anybody who's trying to find the truth. Some of this, I would like to just point out that the official story of how 9/11 went off is a conspiracy theory.
Okay.
19 hijackers with box cutters commandeered aircraft, flew them into buildings, and caused all this damage. That, by definition, is a conspiracy.
Right. I understand. I understand. I do. But the in layman's terms, when they hear conspiracy theory, laymen who don't may not know, the true English definition, they will look at that and say, "Oh, this is a theory that has been discounted." And it happened to me. I was called a conspiracy theorist at one time. I'm not anymore, but I was. And so I'm bringing this up because this could happen to some of our listeners out there. And this is our moment where we can provide some advice and tips on how to handle such a thing.
Okay, well, the way that we handle that is we have a very strict rule, which is that we stick just to the technical evidence.
Mm-hmm.
We tell people we're not conspiracy theorists, we're experts in our field. We're licensed by the state, and one of the requirements of our licensure is that we protect the public safety. So we are doing our due diligence to protect the public safety and acting as experts in that capacity. We do not go into any other question regarding 9/11 as to who flew the planes or where the planes came from or anything about that. We stick to the engineering aspects of what happened to those buildings. So to call us conspiracy theory is to say that we're people that are not talking, we don't know what we're talking about. We're making conjecture about this, that, and the other, but none of this is conjecture. This is all engineering practice and experience and education. That's the only thing we're talking about. So for people to call us conspiracy theorists, that's simply a tactic to prevent them from examining the evidence that we are presenting. So we think, actually, I think that the term is beginning to lose its effectiveness, because so many of the things that people have pointed to in the last 5 years or so have turned out to actually have some basis in fact that need to be investigated. And I think 9/11 is one of those. And I think that we have, at Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, we have gained the credibility in the movement and in society in general, so that's all they have left is to call us conspiracy theorists. That's their total answer.
That's a
They don't have a
fabulous response, Roland, and it just fits into that mold. When people that don't agree with you cannot argue the facts, they go after you, and the way to go after you is to call you names. And in this case, they've come up with the conspiracy theorists. And notice, I'm aware this was Wikipedia, and I'm surprised Wikipedia allows something like that to stand. That's as we pointed out, it's a derogatory term. I'm surprised Wikipedia even allows that. In fact, I think I'm going to go. I bet I'd be interested to see what would happen if I remove that from the Wikipedia article to find out what would happen.
Well,
I recently got. Did you go on?
Let me just give you a little background on that. We have volunteers that have gone to Wikipedia and stayed on it for months at a time, correcting it each time that it came up, and they fix it within 10 or 15 minutes. They go back to, in other words, we point out, you can't call us conspiracy theorists. We're experts in our field. We're discussing a subject matter of our expertise. We're not conspiracy theorists, we're experts. You can put that in there and it'll come back as conspiracy theories within a few minutes.
Right.
They have in other words, they monitor that site.
Somebody's monitoring it.
Right.
So when that, so what you're telling me, if I do that, it's going to be put back within 15 minutes. But here's the question though. Do any of the people removing that get blocked from using Wikipedia?
I don't know the answer to that.
I wouldn't be surprised. Or gotten harassed. Wikipedia asked me, they don't know who I am, but they asked my username. Have you ever been afraid to modify Wikipedia for fear of being harassed? And I wrote back, yes. And so that's going on in Wikipedia. So another thing I'm surprised Wikipedia even allows it, the word conspiracy theory, but for all your listeners out there, whenever, just keep in mind that Wikipedia is not the bastion of truth and the bastion of journalism. Really, the only thing you should use Wikipedia for is things for like names and dates and very specific hard facts. But certainly anything that's not, certainly anything that's got even a little bit of controversy to it, even a little bit, I would never go to Wikipedia. But enough about Wikipedia. It's a shame. It's a good product that that's being abused.
Yeah, well, I would agree.
But it is a good product. So about one out of time. Let me check my list one more time. I really don't want to leave anything out. This is just the only other thing that I want to that you mentioned that I'd never heard of, and our listeners need to know about it, is the RFC, a request for correction. Is this something that any citizen in the United States can do, a request for correction?
Yes, it's an article of the law. It's called the APA. It's a law that requires federal agencies to issue truthful information to the public.
That's
And
fabulous. I didn't know about it.
if any government agency, administrative publication, I'll send you the actual name
Sure.
of it.
And how is this different from a request under the Freedom of Information Act?
Well, this law is it, in other words, here's the situation. You see a report from a government agency.
Mhm.
You read the report.
Uh-huh.
You see that there's factual inaccuracies in the report. So you can file a report, you can file a request for correction to that agency and say, listen, here's the problems on page such and such and blah, 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 and you run it all down, and they are required to respond to you.
So it
Now,
may be under the Freedom of Information Act, but this is specifically for reports.
this is specifically for government issued reports.
Good to know. I learned something today, something valuable that knowing me, I bet I'm going to use it.
Yeah, well, it is theoretically a device to get accountability from the government. However, I just have to tell you that when they turned us down, we took that into court. And we went into I think it's the First District Court, Washington, D.C., and they issued a ruling that actually said that although the government had to respond, their reports did not have to be truthful. So, yeah, right. That's what we said. What? In other words, they let the NIST off the hook.
That's what I was just thinking. They let him off the hook.
Yeah.
Wow. And do you
Yeah.
have a copy of this? I would put that on the front page of my website.
Right. Well,
Like
I will send you all this information.
Sure. Well, no, I believe you. You don't need to prove it to me. I was just saying, if I had something like that about my organization, I would put it on the homepage of my website. Yeah.
Yeah, we just recently made a decision not to appeal that decision,
Okay.
because if we appeal it and we lost at the appellate court level, then that would cement it into citable case law. And we don't want to make bad law by trying to overturn decisions that were bad decisions.
Wow. So I totally, I wish we'd met a long time ago, because apparently you and I have been, or your organization and my organization have seen a lot of the same sorts of shenanigans. In my case, we prevailed after 10 years, but it took 10 years to do it. And now the Army Corps of Engineers is no longer trying to blame local officials and the people of New Orleans for the flooding of New Orleans. It's no longer trying to do that, but they're still not really will really come out and readily say, yes, well, we did have a failure in the city of New Orleans. Our levees did fail. We didn't build them to spec. And well, actually, they did build in the specification. The design was inadequate. So
Yeah.
but they still are very reluctant to say that. You might get a spokesperson here, a spokesperson there, but you're not going to get an official statement from the Army Corps of Engineers, and I don't think we ever will. But as far as I'm concerned, we prevailed well enough. Even the New York Times and the Associated Press, whenever they talk about the flooding of New Orleans during Katrina, they do talk about federal levee failure. So that's good enough for us.
I want to congratulate you on that achievement. That is a remarkable achievement. That frankly, I'm amazed that you were able to accomplish that. You must be some kind of a terrific organizer and motivator. And talk about persistence. I have to hand it to you. That's a great job.
Thank you. I think if I were to look back in time, it's probably due to relationships that have been built up over a long period of time.
Yeah.
And maybe they did it to shut me up. I don't know. But I would, if I were to point to something, I would say the people I worked with are people that I've worked with a long time. And that may be what it was. But thank you for that compliment very much. I didn't do it alone, obviously. I'm the leader of a very, very large group, and it's been quite a ride. And speaking of ride, I mean, you've been on quite a ride too, but it sounds like you still have more work ahead of you. If any of our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where would you direct them?
Our website is Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. And our latest project is we're going to put out a book. The title of the book is Engineering the 9/11 Cover-Up: How the World Trade Center Evidence Was Kept Secret from the Public. And we're going to go all the way through the evidence, and we're going to name the names of the organizations and the people that worked on the government reports, and we're calling them persons of interest. We know that there's somebody in there that was responsible for making these decisions that led the investigations away from the evidence. And we're going to go as far as we can with that, because we think it's time, long past time, for these people to step forward and give us the inside story about what happened behind the scenes that led these investigations astray.
Because we deserve to know the truth.
Exactly.
So when will this book be out?
We're in the process of putting it together, and there's a process by which you can get the chapters as they're drafted one at a time. You can go to our website, you can pay $35, and we'll send you by email each chapter as it's drafted. Right now, we're looking at about 8 or 9 chapters and several appendixes, and the first one is due to come out next month, first chapter. And we've got drafts of the other chapters, so hopefully we'll get them out in short order after that, and then we'll publish the entire book when we're done.
Great, because engineering minds want to know.
There's a lot.
I'm making a little joke there, but really everyone wants to know. There's no one on the planet who doesn't know what happened on 9/11. And so thank you so much, Roland, for joining me. And you, the listeners, I hope all of you enjoyed this episode. For those of you who like to watch videos, you can see a video version of this episode on my YouTube channel, on my playlist. It's called Beat the Big Guys. And for all of the rest of you, be sure to like, subscribe, and rate this episode, and rate this show, this podcast, on all of your favorite platforms. And remember, no matter who you are, you too can beat the big guys.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks so much. You stay with me.